And a lot of what you said, I agree with. We need to do the research. But this isn't a bill asking that research be done. This is a bill asking that we create this notion of medical marijuana and make it available to our citizens with no prescribing guidelines. Like you said, different strains might work on different things. These are the things that have to be studied. But we have in this bill language that says, for example, injuries that significantly interfere with daily activities. That tells me one thing. That kind of language is open to abuse. So I'll suggest to you, as I have all along, we can work together to try to encourage the FDA to do true clinical trials in this area. And we have a bill, a Senate Bill 124,
Robert,
that speaks to the oil.
Robert,
and
you asked a question.
That seems to be a meaningful bill.
Mr. Chairman, to ask a question, I would contend that this isn't the federal government here. This is the state of Kentucky. I'm not a resident of Kentucky, but if I was, I would ask you, sir, to defend your citizens. Defend them now. Defend their needs. Listen to them. Care for them. And if you need to break new ground, if you need to establish guidelines, if you need to protect the citizens from abuse, do so. But do so in a way that protects those of us who are telling you that we see light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I agree with you that citizens need to be protected, and that's exactly why I disagree with the notion that we ought to release a Scheduled I drug into our community that has not been studied. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Westrom, and then Representative Meeks, then we're going to take a motion on the bill.
I'm going to pass on my question. There are too many. Thank you.
Meeks.
Doctor, thank you for being here, and thank you for your testimony. This morning on the drive to Frankfort, there was a news story involving the FDA. One arm of the FDA was talking about the proliferation of narcotic drugs and the addiction problem. The other arm of the FDA was approving medicine that was highly addictive. I find myself looking at this issue in much the same way. My question to you is for non-VA patients, not everybody is a veteran, how would they have access, how would the doctors prescribe this product? Where would it come from? How would they get it? What's the process there? I'm very familiar with the VA and its internal workings. But for non-VA patients, how would they be taken care of?
Well, I appreciate the question because we have a lot of experience in Arizona. We passed our medical marijuana law in 2010, 4 years ago, and 2 years ago we fully implemented the law, and now we have 77 dispensaries statewide that are providing lab-tested, purified marijuana to sick patients. And so that's what happens. The doctor certifies the patient. There's a one-page form that the doctor fills out that confirms the patient has a qualifying diagnosis. That's sent to the health department, uploaded into a website with all of the other all the other documentation that's required. And then a card is issued to a patient. These are very specific cards that cannot be counterfeited. And then the card is taken to the dispensary, and the patient is allowed to purchase small amounts of cannabis, at a certain amount each month, and they're allowed to identify a caregiver also if they are too sick to be able to pick up their own marijuana.
And how long did it take for the state of Arizona to develop those 79 dispensaries?
That's a good question. Yeah, it took us a year. Our health department spent a year research, because we were kind of a pioneer at that point. Not many states had joined in yet. And so now we've become sort of a consultant to other states that are adopting medical marijuana laws. And I want you to know that our health department would be happy to come out here and consult with your team and help you shape a program that is truly medical. That's something that's really important to us.
And approximately what was the cost of that to the state?
Well, that's what's interesting is this program has actually accumulated a $7 million surplus from doing nothing but selling cards to patients and collecting license fees from dispensaries. So not only is it budget neutral, but it's actually galvanized a surplus. And in our state, we have a voter protection law, so that money can't be swept by the legislature, so it ends up just accumulating in the health department fund, and we're hoping that someday that money could be used to sponsor high-level marijuana research so that we can begin to understand more about. But I did want to mention, in terms of the other members' comments, you know, the FDA has approved all of our studies, and that's what's really surprising. The FDA is a partner in identifying the need for marijuana research. They are fully on board, and they've endorsed our study and other studies that we've done as being extremely important and scientifically sound. So there's a misconception among the public that FDA is a blockade. They are not a blockade. They are collaborators. The problem is the DEA and NIDA, this second review by NIDA, not being able to purchase study drug from the federal government. This is very onerous, and that's the blockade that needs to be ended. But it won't be ended in the next few years. And even if it does, these studies take years to produce, to get published, and in the meantime, these folks are suffering, and that's what is so heartbreaking.
Is there a motion on the bill? And seconded? Secretary, take the roll.
Representative Adams? No. Representative Benvenuti?
I'd like to explain my vote. I'm voting no. I don't believe this committee is appropriate in voting for this bill. I'm supportive of the research, but the research needs to be conducted. We simply cannot risk additional addiction and dependence in Kentucky. We cannot continue to put our young people, and our adults for that matter, at risk for overdose, traffic fatalities. We must do the research first. This is not a research bill. This is a bill that says that this legislature will decide what's a medicine and what's not. And I don't believe we have the authority to do that. And I think any belief that we do have the authority is arrogant, irresponsible, and reckless. Thank you.
Representative DeWeese?
Hold on. We're in a roll call.
Representative DeWeese? Representative Flood? Representative Jenkins? Yes. Representative Marzian? Yes. Representative Meeks? Representative Moore? Representative Owens? Representative Palumbo? Representative Wade? Representative Watkins?
Yes.
Representative Weber? Representative Westrom?
I'd like to explain my vote. This is a 48-page bill, and I apologize. I have not read the entire bill, and what I read, I have so many questions. I don't know how we can address it in a 15-minute period about such an important topic. I really believe this needs to be a discussion that needs to be held in the interim, where we can bring every party to the table that has the background to answer all the questions that many of us probably have. I do support the use of medical marijuana when the legislation is done very precisely, very carefully, very well vetted. And also having the opportunity to learn lessons from other states that have implemented this. There are just far too many people we haven't heard, and it's unlikely we would be able to during a session. So this time I'm going to pass, and I'm going to ask that we just have more time to have a discussion where we can make wise healthcare policy decisions based on all the information we need to do that. And this isn't, it's a miracle this bill has even been able to come before us today. I'll look very carefully at the Senate bill because I know there's a research component to that. And, but you know, like many members, I want to be very careful about this, but I want to make certain that we know exactly what we're doing. When I do have questions about a registered designated caregiver and 3 ounces and 12 plants, and I mean, it's that kind of question that we don't have the time to answer right now. And I really need some assurances of what all is in this bill. And I thank you for your patience.
Representative Bushner, Chairman Birch.
I'm going to vote yes, and the reason is I think there's something called the greater good. You know, years ago we had a bill up here, we passed it, that people were suffering from incurable cancer had to go to Mexico to get treatment for it. And it was not approved by anybody, but some people went there to get that treatment. And the only way you break down these barriers is the fact that each state has to adopt them. And finally, right now, the federal government is rolling over. They're not sending anybody to jail for medical marijuana in any of these states. And to deny these people for the reasons you give today, just don't float the boat. I vote yes. I mean, 7 yes, 5 no's, and 2 passes. Anybody want to change or explain their vote?
I'll explain my vote, Mr. Chairman. I believe that there are other options that we are considering here in the legislature, including the cannabis oil, that would provide some of the benefits that have been touted without the potential for addiction. And I've stated before, Colorado has gone to great extremes that I don't think they have reaped the whirlwind that they shall. But even from a military readiness standpoint, they have wreaked great havoc upon the military bases in Colorado, the commanders who try to command young men and women and tell them very clearly what is prohibited still in the military. And we have 2 pretty major military installations here, and other Guard and Reserve folks who live and work in Kentucky. And so I think there are many other aspects of this.
Representative Moore, we're in the roll call.
Yes, sir, I was explaining my vote. You asked me if I wanted to change or explain the vote. Yes, sir, I was explaining it. Thank you, Doug.
I thought we was still roll call. Susan Wester.
In order for the conversation to continue, I'll vote yes. However, I don't want to give anybody false hope. I don't believe this bill is going anywhere in this session. But I do believe the conversation needs to be held, but it needs to be held in a different manner, much more professional. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that about you, but we need to bring in all aspects of the conversation.
Mr. Chairman, I also believe this is a very important conversation, not just for you individuals out there in the audience who will benefit personally, but also for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, those who are not here. I believe that we do need additional information at the table, and maybe we can get that if we continue the conversation. So I will change my vote and vote yes.
Bill passes out favorably.
Mr. Chairman, I would really like to thank the committee, and I was brought around to being a sponsor of this piece of legislation because I have seen the bags of medicines, pharmaceuticals, FDA-approved medications that folks are trying to take to alleviate suffering that are not working, that are causing addictions. And if we can explore this avenue, and I agree with you, Representative Wester and Representative Meeks, that this conversation needs to be continued and to give folks in this state hope that we are going to look at this very seriously in the future. Thank you so much.